Another edition here of Getting There with Goz. Look at that face on the visual side. It has been a while, almost about 2 months. We said we were going to get there, and sure enough, we've got better graphics, we've got better lighting. Hopefully, you'll see this evolution of the podcast. My guy Brian, the closer Mariano, joins us again for this one. It is another story-themed episode for this one. We're going to talk about what goes on behind the scenes at March Madness. The bracket is out. March Madness is here. You're getting ready to figure out the teams that are going deep and everything else. But while you enjoy the games, let's take you behind the scenes of what we've experienced covering the NCAA tournament. Now, I'll be sharing stories from the 2016 NCAA tournament, which, by the way, I consider the greatest NCAA tournament of all time. Go look at the buzzer beaters and everything else that happened in 2016. Closer, you're going to share your experience from, and I was in Providence, by the way. You're going to share your experience from 2019 in Buffalo, and kind of you and I are going to kind of go through the same timeline of how we got in, where do we sit, who do we interview, stories that people would not hear. So that's what we're going to do here. We've both covered the NCAA tournament. It's an amazing time, but I think a lot of people don't know how insane of a day it can be when you're working on the media side.
Guys, there's no doubt about it, man. I appreciate you having me back on, and obviously I can see, if anyone's watching on the visual side, how much better all these graphics have become. We've come a long way in 2 months, so I love it. Everything sounds great, my man. And, of course, people just think that the tournament starts with Selection Sunday, and then all of a sudden you fill out your bracket for 3 days, and then the tournament starts. But when you're on the media side of it and you're trying to go out and get all of these stories that you don't see just watching all of the telecast, it can be hectic. And there's plenty of times, as you know, and people will hear in this episode, that those are long days for media members. And what you're going to hear certain stories that will prove that, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm going to let you take the first shot at this story here because it's a New York connection because you covered it in Buffalo. Take us through the process of how you ended up getting the media pass to go, how you actually got into the building, and where you were watching the games from.
So my first NCAA tournament was in Buffalo. I did cover one in Hartford as well. But the Buffalo story, as you led me right to it, is quite a story. So I remember discussing it with you at the time that you were my boss at the radio station. I just said, hey, listen, I'm really interested. Buffalo is a close drive for us. You know, Syracuse, a couple hours. Albany is about 4.5, depending on where you're going. And I said, I'm really interested in covering the tournament. Now, I had no allegiance of Albany could have been there, Siena could have been there. There was no team from the regional area that I was going to cover. I just wanted the experience of covering an NCAA tournament. So you said, yep, let's do it. So we go through the process. And now it starts with just trying to put your name in this huge amount of people. And you'll know this, guys, from covering the Super Bowl, of the amount of media that's actually there. Now break that up into so many different sites throughout this NCAA tournament. It's kind of a pod of a group of people that you have to go in and apply for this credential. And then hopefully you're one that gets chosen to say, yes, you can go to this designated site and then go cover the NCAA tournament. So I was lucky enough to get chosen for Buffalo. Now, the week of it, I'm the first time ever doing this, so I have no idea what to expect. I have no idea how early I should get there. Should I leave the night before? Should I leave the morning of? I decide I'm leaving the morning of. So I leave Albany right around 5:30 in the morning. Grab a coffee, on my way, and I'm heading down I-90, heading to Buffalo. I get there just in time to kind of get my bearings straight. I didn't even go to the hotel where I was staying at. I went right to the arena to go cover those. It was a Thursday afternoon slate of games. And now I know a lot of people, when they listen, you think NCAA tournament, it's games from noon all the way until 11 o'clock, sometimes even past midnight when you get those West Coast games. It feels every bit of that when you're going to cover any sort of site for an NCAA tournament game. Because I got there about 10:15, parked the car, have no idea where to park, no idea where the media parking is. I'm just trying to find somewhere where I don't have to drive around for 10 minutes to try and get into the building. Finally, I do. And probably one of the best stories that I've ever had, at least covering any sort of media or sporting event. I walk in, and now this media room, for people who've never been in one, there's media rooms that are small. I mean, the size of closets with just a bunch of papers that you need for the game. This thing is a cafeteria that's probably the size. You see the background behind me. This room probably holds 150 people that I'm broadcasting in right now. You could have fit that times 2 in the size of this media room. And I'm seeing everybody, to Vern Lundquist, who's calling games in that pod that year, to just regular guys that are covering, we know Sal Capaccio, who was there covering for his station out in Buffalo. I'm like, what am I doing here? Oh my God, this is insane. So now I'm trying to figure out what the next step is. So I go and they have this huge thing on the wall, and it's all the names, and then it has a number of where you're sitting. And it's not like, obviously, you know where Vern Lundquist is sitting, you know where Bill Raftery's sitting, all these guys that are calling games. But now I'm just a kid covering it from, Albany, New York. I finally find it. Brian Mariano. Okay, I'm in seat 114. Again, first time there, have no idea what seat 114 means. Maybe there's 150 seats around, I've covered MAC tournaments, I've covered America East tournaments. Maybe it's right around the court somewhere. So I grab my stuff, let's go. We're about an hour before the first tip, so 11:15, 11:20 Eastern, and I walk out to the floor. Now, again, first time ever seeing this live. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is March Madness. The court is all painted, ready to go. And this guy is security working right next to the court. And he could tell that I'm like, you really have no clue where you're going. So he goes, hey, man, can I help you out? I go, yeah. I go, I'm looking for seat 114. He goes, okay. And for those listening, and not watching right now, if you could describe the way that my head turns, it looks up. Like, I'm not looking across the court. I'm looking up. And I mean past the lights. He goes, yeah, you're up there. Wait, say that again? He goes, yeah, you're up there, where the media room is for when they do Buffalo Sabres games. I'm like, oh, my God. So I take an elevator 5 floors up to then find my seat, which is just a huge row of different people. And there's got to be 200 seats up there. I'm like, oh, boy. I still have the picture to this day looking down, and I send it to my friends in a huge group chat. And I'm like, well, guys, this is how you cover an NCAA tournament. I'm pretty sure I could touch the lights. That's how high up here I am. So it was quite a kind of a shock to the system when you realized I'm in my dreams thinking I'm going to be sitting next to the court. I'll be 20 feet away from Vern Lundquist, who's calling the game. And that's what my experience is going to be. And then in reality, it's you're sitting all the way up there. No one even knows you're there. And you're going to have to take 500 steps just to get down to the media room again and then go do any sort of interviews that you want. So that was kind of a quick start of a reality check for me, being the first time ever covering an NCAA tournament.
Well, usually I'd go front to back, but because you gave me such a good segue there, a nice transition, whatever phrase we want to use, I have a picture here.
There it is.
That is my seat. And if you're watching on YouTube, that is my seat in Providence. So you can tell Closer and I have had a very similar experience. And we can't speak for everyone, but the fact that 2 of us have covered March Madness and 2 of us have very close to the same start of that story, where I show up, again, Thursday, Saturday slate of games. I'm driving from Albany to Providence, which I believe was about 3.5 hours.
Yep.
My dad came with me because he's retired and wanted to go watch the games. So same thing. We actually did check into the hotel early and then walked, because if you know my dad, CrossFit Kringle,
there he is.
Always, we walk from the hotel into the Dunkin' Donuts Center, which I believe was about a mile.
Oh,
we might have gotten lost. So now here we are walking around the Dunkin' Donuts Center with no idea where the entrance is. I finally get in after walking. My dad's loving it. He's getting some early exercise. And same thing to you, man. I get in. I try to find my seat. I know they didn't use this phrase called the leftover section.
Right.
But you talked about basically looking at the sheet. And some of you may have gone through this experience if you played sports in high school, where you see whether or not you made the team. I was fortunate to never get cut from a team, but it felt like I got cut that day. Like, that experience was, I'm looking for my name. I'm like, I'm not on the sheet. Like, I don't have a chair. I don't know where to sit. So I had to ask somebody, I'm like, hey, I have a pass. Where am I sitting? They go, oh, you're up there. You're up. And they point to what we're looking at here on YouTube. You see the screen where it's like, huh? I thought I was in March Madness. So, yeah, I had the Thursday, Friday slate of games as you did as well. And I thought it was going to be the greatest thing ever. And early on, you feel like, I could be on my couch right now. I'm very honored and privileged to be here to watch these tournament games. But initially, that first thought is, I kind of like the multiple TVs to go right now.
So
All
I
right,
don't know how you did this, not to cut you off quick, but I know
No,
that
you're
I had
good.
that same feeling when I got there because I was like, boy, I could be watching all these other games. And now the setup in Buffalo and then when I was in Hartford were two very different things. But the one in Buffalo, because it's an arena that has professional teams that play in it with the Sabres, they had the media section I was in had a big TV. So they had multiple ones so you could watch that. But where my seat was, as you showed where yours was, I was significantly higher. So, and where it was almost like a stadium style seating where I'm watching as on my iPad right here, the other games of the ones that I'm covering as well. So
Me too. Same with me.
I don't know how the guard did with you, but he looked at me as if like, I've done this so many times, and this kid has no idea what he's about to get into. And he's just kind of like smiling at me with this big smirk. I'm like, oh, goodness.
So you and I, because it's an East Coast game, we get basically what is that 12:15, 2:30, 7:30, 9:30 window. I actually, from my end, I had Duke, UNC, Wilmington. That's a Brandon Ingram team. That was the first game of the round of 64 that tipped off in the 2016 NCAA tournament. You may have had the same thing on your end. Take us through what you have for that first game and what your responsibilities are following the first game.
I'm pretty sure it was West Virginia was the first game that I had. So obviously with Huggins, that was kind of the angle. I had really no other storylines, but I'm like, I want to kind of see what this is like because I've heard so many stories about what he's like with the media and how just watching him other than what you just see on TV. And I was able to, after the first game, I got down there quickly, got a seat in the press conference area, which depending on where you are, you don't know if you could even get a seat. Like I said, like the setups are so different depending on where you're going. And when I finally got down there, I'm trying to get sound that I wanted to send back to you guys because you guys were going to be on the air later that day. And the only way I'm looking around and I'm like, how am I going to get sound? I was going to put my phone up on the podium, but like there was guys standing right in front of the podium. So almost like they're going to tackle me if I go to try to put my phone up there. So I look over and these veteran guys are standing by the speakers that are on each end of this stage and holding their phones up to the speaker. And I'm like, wow, that is the most genius thing I've ever heard of. So I just hit record and I did that. So that was my first experience of how am I going to get sound when I don't really have another way other than my phone. And that was the first time I got sound at the NCAA tournament of Bob Huggins.
So much smoother than what happened for me. So much better. So first of all, by the way, I want to offer a piece of advice there, especially for young media members. If you do cover a press conference and you are getting sound, or you do kind of what Closer's talking about, where if there is a podium, and I've actually seen people place their cell phones on the podium, please note this. Put your phone on airplane mode. I know that sounds very obvious, but when you're recording, you would think, okay, my phone's just on or it's on vibrate. God forbid you get a call while Bob Huggins is up there and he forgot to put your phone on airplane mode, or he sees you get a text message. Yeah.
I want to have that experience, though, if him doing that and then be like, oh, hey, this is your phone here. Mom's calling. Hey, or even worse, he answers it. Maybe he just answers it and says, oh, hey, this is so-and-so's mom. This is Bob Huggins. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, yeah, we won the game, by the way. Yeah. So for me, and this is going to sound strange because we both played sports growing up. So I've obviously been in locker rooms before, whether it be at the high school or college level. But this is my first time ever. I've done broadcasting. I've ever covered a post-game in the actual locker room. Because when I worked in Central New York, I was hosting the post-game show. So I was back in studio. Right. When I worked in Geneva, I was up in the booth. So there's no reason to get sound because I called the game. I was on the play-by-play side. So what actually happened in my Providence thing was I got a call from the Associated Press. So the Associated Press, and I believe they still do this, they have a thing called stringer reporters. Mm-hmm. And because I didn't have an outlet that I was working for directly, like Closer kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, we're not really covering Albany or Siena. We're kind of, there's a little bit of, getting the events for our own station. The Associated Press reached out to me and said, hey, do you have any interest in being a stringer? Now, what a stringer is, and there's different variations of this, but I'll do my best to kind of sum it up. There's some really good examples of stringer work. If you listen to CBS Sports Radio on the weekends, Rich Ackerman uses a lot of stringers. Sid Rosenberg on his Sunday morning show on ABC Radio. Shout out to Sid and Guns. They used to have me be a stringer on their show. And Colin Cowherd did a variation of this when he was on ESPN with like spanning the globe. Yep. Basically, a reporter from a certain city calls in and said, hey, here's what's happening in the city. If you're doing stringer work during a game, hey, we go live to Providence, Rhode Island. Tom Kozlowski's on the scene. Hey, Tom, what's going on? Hey, it's 25-20. Duke leads UNC Wilmington. Brandon Ingram having a great game. He's got 10. You get the idea of what a stringer is. Yep. So the AP asked me to get some stringer sound. So now I'm not only just working for 104.5, the team, I'm getting a freelance opportunity to work for the Associated Press. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is awesome. But I tell you, I am sweating through my suit. I am so nervous because if you know me, I know nothing about directions. I've never been in a locker room before. I'm very, I want to do it the right way. I try to be professional as I can. I'm there in a suit and tie. Like I want to do it the right way, but I'm not sure what the right way is. And again, if you know me, doing things for the first time, I suck at it. Like I'm horrible at like doing something right the first time. So I have no idea what I'm going to do. No clue. I have zero idea of how to get to the locker room. None. So what I think I should do is I should just follow where the media crowd goes. But I'm having so much anxiety, and I'm really not that type of person that gets anxiety about this. But like I have, like the Associated Press wants me to get sound, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm sitting next to this guy, and I sit next to this guy for 14 and a half hours, the same guy, all day long. And if you follow us on the social media side, I did this for a little tease. Who is the popular ESPN personality God spent 14 and a half hours with that day? It's Dalen Cuff, who is on ESPN now. At that point, he was working for the NBC affiliate down in Washington, Virginia area. So Dalen and I are just sitting there. And once in a while we talk. Other times he was working, I was working. But I'm like, hey, do you know where the locker room is?
And I'm sure, like,
you can just imagine me like sweating in a suit, like so stressed out. As a lot of people like call it the turtle. I'm officially turtled up. The shoulders are up like this. So I'm turning to a guy who years later ends up being one of the faces of ESPN. I'm like, do you know where the locker room is? And he goes, yeah, man, just follow me. So I go in and Duke wins. Duke beats UNC Wilmington. And there I am, like straight ahead. There's Brandon Ingram. But of course, I'm not going to get a quote from Brandon Ingram.
Sure.
So something happens, closer, where I got my audio, but I didn't know what they wanted. Like, look, when we go to press conference and stuff, you mentioned the press stuff. I don't know if you've done the same thing I've done. Usually in radio, and this is not a rule you have to follow, but TV guys have stuff they need for the visual they have. So like, okay, I need a quote to match this. Reporters need stuff for their actual articles. Radio guys, podcast guys, sound is sound. Like you give me a soundbite, I can make a story out of the soundbite. I can get what people need out of that, if that makes sense. Like usually I back off and don't ask questions. So I don't even like TV people do your thing, papers do your thing. I'll be fine whatever they say. So now I got to ask questions, and I got to like figure out this etiquette of like, all right, here I am standing outside the locker room. Do I like wait in line? Like I see everybody else getting like excited, getting their cameras on. I'm like, I'm just standing here like an idiot. I don't know what to do. Am I going to be in somebody's shot?
No direction. Not sure what to do next.
None. And I have no idea how long we're in there. So I think I get like 2 or 3 cuts, and they're just bad. Yeah. I had like, I think my thumb over my phone. The answers were just terrible. Obviously they want like something of it. So it's not great. But they take it. Like the AP is like fine. Like they're like, okay, like, you know, it's good enough. Duke beat UNC Wilmington, whatever. So I'm gonna jump ahead here to the second game that I covered. And if you want to hop in, you can, but it takes a little turn here in game 2. So game 2 is Yale Baylor. And if you remember the Yale Baylor game, that's the 5-12 game. It's one of these weird pod systems where there are more Yale fans there than Baylor fans, because Yale, which is, I believe, in New Haven, Connecticut, is closer to Providence than Waco, Texas.
Yes.
So you get a combination of the fan base actually being closer and that 12-5 game. So Yale beats Baylor. And it's a huge upset on that Thursday, and Yale's going crazy. I think there's a Albany connection, right, with James Jones as the coach of Yale at that point and everything else. So now I'm like, this is how bad it is, though. Like when you're having this stress, I'm like, I'm rooting for Baylor. Even though I'm there for the upset. And even though on my own personal bracket I had Yale, I didn't want Yale to win because now the pressure was on that I was going to screw it up, and this time somebody would notice. And to top it off, I fully admit I didn't study the Yale roster that well. I didn't think I thought Yale would win, but I wasn't like, okay, you got to know your seventh player on Yale because they might have. It just wasn't ready for that. And of course, everybody would want that cut. So I go in and I have to get 2 pieces of audio from Yale. So they tell me, hey, you need 2 cuts from the winning team and 1 cut from the losing team. So I'm like, okay. So, I asked some generic stuff to Yale, and their locker room's nuts. It's so cool. It's not as if I'm in there with like the Gatorade shower and everything else, but we have to wait about another 20 minutes before they let the media in, before you see all those cool cuts on March Madness. So we're in like 20 minutes after. You see it though. Everybody's drenched. It's awesome.
Right.
So the Yale thing goes fine. And closer, you can add to this as well. The worst thing you can do, and reporters who do this as their profession, they probably don't think it's the worst, but going into a locker room after a team's season has ended, and for the college level, an NCAA tournament upset, you've got to step in there and stick a camera or a microphone in a 19 or 20-year-old's face. It's brutal. So I go to the Baylor locker room because the AP wants a quote, and there I am, and there's only about 6 or 7 people in there. And like, I don't want to be in there. I feel like a scumbag because it's like these kids like just got their heart broken on national television. And obviously no one wants to talk to me. Mm-hmm. But my job now at this point is to get some type of quote. And for those who remember this player, a guy named Rico Gathers. Rico Gathers got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
So I go up to Rico Gathers, and I can tell he wants to strangle me right now. He's 6'6", might even be 6'8". I think he's listed at 6'8". And I'm not a small guy by any stretch. And he like is death staring me because now I'm in front of him with a phone like, hey, Rico, what happened in the game? How's it feel to get bumped out early in the NCAA? Because I know that's what the AP wants. And like,
sure,
he's going to kill me right now on the spot. And the AP calls me back and they're like, we can't use these quotes. They're terrible. These are awful. Like, what are we supposed to do with this? We're not going to pay you for these things. So they start ripping me a new one over the phone. And I'm thinking in my head like, okay, the first ones were bad. I'll give you the Duke stuff wasn't great. What do you want me to do? Look, if I was more experienced, if I was a reporter, if I was used to going into the locker rooms, I probably would have had better strategies, and maybe in the future we'll get episodes on of how to handle these situations better. Mm-hmm. But my first time ever doing it, after an upset loss, and I was getting complained. I can say bitch now. I was getting bitched and complained at that my cuts weren't good. And close, I think you had a similar experience going into the losing locker room in your time.
So obviously, and I think you've noticed this too, after you do something for a while, you get a little bit better experience. Now, granted, the direction thing when you go to any NCAA tournament isn't easy. Like when I went to Hartford the second time, it still wasn't as easy to find my way around because I'm only there for the day usually. So I'm like, but this was different. So now I'm in Hartford, and you kind of alluded this in your story too. For those that have never actually been to an NCAA tournament where you have pods like they do now, the atmosphere changes depending on what's going on in the game. So I know a lot of people like upsets. You fill out a bracket, you're rooting for the upset. So that's kind of when a team that's a higher seed and the game becomes close late in the game, there are fans from other schools that are rooting for the upset just because they want to see it. So
yeah, and one other, sorry, real quick, Chloe, so people understand this. They sell it in sessions. So Correct. If you buy a ticket to game 1, you actually don't go to just game 1. You have game 1 and game 2. That's how your package comes in sessions. So you get 2 tickets basically for the price of 1, I guess is the best way to describe it. You can sit through the games is the best way to describe it. You're right.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, you have the 12:15 and then 2:30 games. So if you bought the session, you would get both games. Even if your team is playing at 12:15, you would get both of those. If you wanted to stay, you'd have to buy another session pass for the late games. So this, for me, the first time I went to Buffalo, didn't really have a lot of stories, was just trying to kind of cut my teeth into how to do this stuff. Then when I got hired with UAlbany, it became so much easier for me to be in a locker room because I was so used to, with football and basketball, still that way, where I'm comfortable being in the locker room. I interview Will Brown before every game, interview Greg Gattuso before every game and after every game. So it became a little bit easier for me to not look at coaches as in like, oh my goodness, like I'm going to fumble over my words. I'm going to say something wrong. They're not going to want to talk to me, whatever. So we get to Hartford, and now this pod is loaded. The first game is Florida State as a 4 seed is playing Vermont. Now Vermont, all you have to do is go north 2 hours, and that's pretty much how close they are to Hartford, Connecticut. playing Florida State all the way from Tallahassee. Now, the story for me, I'm going there for these two players, just two, because former UAlbany players, David Nichols, who now plays overseas, is playing for Florida State because that's where he transferred. So I want to get that. And even perfect, he's playing Vermont, who plays in the same conference as UAlbany. So I have angles everywhere for this 12 o'clock game. Perfect. The later game for 7 o'clock is Joe Cremo, Scotia native, former UAlbany player, now transfers to Villanova. They are playing at 7 o'clock. And just because I was there, I get John Morant and Murray State playing at 2:30. So a guy that's going to go top 3 in the NBA draft is playing in front of me. And just so happens because I wanted to go out there to cover these other two players. So it was an incredible happenstance of I couldn't believe that I was going to get all of these storylines. And I remember telling you before I left, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have time to write all 3 stories, but I'm going to try. So the first real feeling was that Bob Huggins story when you went in to try and get sound. Now I don't really care what the podium sound is. I want to talk to David one-on-one. We know each other so many times traveling with UAlbany. I'd already gotten a hold of him saying, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you mind if we get together after the game? Absolutely no problem. So as you alluded to, there's a 15-minute cooling off period for these players and coaches to go in their locker rooms. They can say what they need to say. And again, now I'm still going to get the story from Vermont's side too, because they have a Colony kid who still plays there, Isaiah Powell, who I want to get what he says. He's a freshman. And I want to hear what Anthony Lamb has to say. He's a senior. So I want to hear all of these different thoughts before I go over and get the story with David as well. So I go in, and I got the same feeling you did. I'm waiting outside the Vermont locker room. I know David because Florida State won, so they're going to the podium. So they'll go first and then go to the locker room. So I figured I will go to the locker room for Vermont first, get what I need to get, and then go wait and talk to David afterwards. But the feeling of I'm walking in, these kids, some of them are seniors, they're never going to play basketball again. So, and Isaiah, we talked, when the Vermont UAlbany played twice, but not really to the point where I'm going to go in and stick my microphone right in his face and say, how's it feel as a freshman to lose in the NCAA tournament when you first got here? Right. So it was tough, and it is. But you have to, I think you know this just as well as anyone, you're not trying to be mean. You're still just trying to get the quote. I just want to know what it felt like to be there as a freshman to play in this style, in this atmosphere. And he was great. He actually said to me, I'm like, hey, Isaiah, can I grab you real quick? I work for 104.5, the team in Albany. He's like, you want to talk to me? He was almost like shocked, like, really? I'm like, yeah, you did play at Colony, right? Am I reading this right? He goes, yes, I did. So we end up, he gives me some great words. I said, congrats, man. You got a long career ahead of you. Good luck. And he said, thanks. I appreciate it. So I leave. This is where the story kind of takes a turn. And I was never prepared. You can go to however many NCAA tournaments you want. You're never prepared for this. So I'm waiting outside the Florida State locker room. And for anyone, you can go and I want the more personal conversation with David. How's it feel now? You won an NCAA tournament game after the year you left UAlbany. I want to hear that side as opposed to the podium sound, the national guys asking him questions about the game. I don't need that stuff. And they transcribe all of that. So if I really wanted it, I could just go and grab it and they give it to me. So I finally get into the locker room and he's coming back from the podium and I asked their, not their athletic director, but the kind of the media guy for Florida State. And I said, hey, do you know when David's coming back? He goes, yeah, he's getting treatment. He'll be back in like 5 minutes. All of a sudden, I hear this loud yell. And I see one of the players just collapse. And now he did not play. He just collapsed to the ground. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I watching right now? And I can see he's on the phone. And I looked at one of the other media members that I was there with, and I said, oh my goodness, what just happened? And they carried him out. And then immediately within 5 seconds, they ushered every one of us out of the locker room. I'm like, oh my goodness, he just got a phone call and I don't know what it was, but clearly he's very upset. It comes to find out within 5 minutes that he got the phone call that his father had passed away.
Ugh.
And to not only have like a sobering moment of how am I going to cover this? And I do want to go and watch the John Morant game just to see him. But now I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is just a moment where, and you know this, you went to an NCAA tournament with your father. You just kind of, I was kind of taken off guard. So he comes up to me, the media guy for Florida State, and he says, "Hey, listen, um, David and Phil Kofer was the player. He said they're very close. So David's not really in, a state of mind." I go, I completely understand. No problem. I go, I'll try to get a hold of him. I have his number directly. So he goes, "Well, I appreciate it. Thanks." I end up talking with David later that night, and I said, "Listen, man, I don't want to put you in any sort of position that you don't want to be in. This is tough news to hear from, your friend." He goes, "I appreciate it, man. Give me a call tomorrow." And that's ended up, I wrote the story and then updated it with his quotes the next day. And it was just a moment of just pure, I want to say, like, I don't know if I was scared, but of just a moment of, I wasn't working anymore. I'm watching a kid, lose his father in front of me. And it just put a lot of things in perspective, as in, like, these games, as much as we love March Madness, I was just in that moment like, my goodness, this game doesn't matter.
No, it was a moment of clarity is what it was. Because,
Yeah.
like, look, we've talked about how nervous we were because we look at March Madness, and I love March Madness. It's my favorite sporting event. You love it too. You've gone to it twice. That even though we might be nervous, there are bigger things than that, and it's really an exciting event. But what makes March Madness so incredible is these stories, whether it's perseverance or who you're doing it for or the community you're doing it for. That's what makes this event so special, is that you might see an upset coming up here in the next few days from a school you've never heard of, and that community who's rooted for them, and the alumni and the alumni and everybody. Like, that's what makes this event so incredible, because the emotions that surrounded the adversity that these athletes have to overcome is just, as you mentioned, almost unpredictable to have those things happen. Now, I want to move to what happened in Providence, because you mentioned my dad was there.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who know my dad, he's kind of like me. He likes to sneak into places and have a good time. So he couldn't get a ticket for session one, and he blames that. Look, Yale was close. Duke was there. It's a national brand. That's a tough ticket to get.
Sure.
So what wasn't as tough is when the second session in Providence, Rhode Island featured these teams: Arizona, Wichita State, Miami, and Buffalo. I don't know if you could have picked four teams geographically that would not have traveled to Providence. So sure enough, he gets in for that one. I get a call, "Tommy boy, I'm in the Buffalo student section. I got to take some pictures. It's wild in here." So you can just imagine. I hope somebody can find a TV version of this. The Buffalo student section is a bunch of students, and there's my dad. Someone go through the footage of Miami Buffalo in the round of 64 and see if you can spot your dad. He loved it. He said they were buying him beers. He felt like he was in college again, going nuts with the Buffalo fans. So
and most people that listen to this, not to cut you off, they know your
good.
father as that person. And when I first met him, when we met him at Saratoga Racecourse, I was like, my God, this guy, I don't care if he's retired or not. He still is like he's 21 again. It's amazing to watch him, especially when you're at sporting events like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, so by the way, that Miami team did defeat Buffalo. It would have been a lot of fun. If you're watching the visual sign, we've got a picture here of Andy Katz with Rodriguez, one of their best players from back then. I got to talk to him after. He was really cool, really good guy to talk to. We got a few other things I want to share on this visual side too, because there's a moment between the Arizona-Wichita State game, and hopefully the volume on this is good, closer. I caught Ron Baker and company going a little wild on their end. There's our first two F-bombs in the history of the there you go. The getting there with guys.
Man.
Apologies for the F-bombs there. But look, it's a podcast. We've gone 20-plus episodes. I can swear in here, blame Ron Baker for the first two F-bombs of the podcast. But I got a lot of traction for me, because there I am filming it, and I'm like, oh, these guys are getting fired up. And nobody was like, oh, my God, can you believe they swore, those college kids, before the NCAA? Nobody felt like that, which was great. Now, there is one other story from this, and we've both felt the same way. We both got there early before the noon tip-off, so we're there around 10:30, 11. And when you do that math, that final game ends up finishing about 11:30. You get sound, you're back. It's about midnight. So it's about a 13 to 13 and a half hour day. So I get back, boy, to the hotel, and after that, probably around midnight. And my dad's all fired up. He doesn't want the night to end. He's like, "Come on, Tommy boy, we gotta go do something. Let's go down to the bar." I'm like, "Dad, I can't move. Like, I'm gassed. I feel like I just played." Like, I'm back in the hotel room, and you go watch. That's the Northern Iowa buzzer beater. I think it was that year. Texas A&M was an insane game with a comeback and all of that.
Yep.
It was just a great tournament overall. So my dad heads down to the lobby. And how this hotel was set up in Providence, it was where the Miami Hurricanes were staying that year. So there, I got a picture with Sebastian, the big Pelican who was out there. Yeah. And how it was set up is when we got down from the rooms, the bar was there, and then the actual lobby itself was there. So we ordered like a late night pizza from somewhere. So my dad goes, "All right, I'm going to go downstairs and see what's going on down there." So he walks down, and at the bar, he sees Lena Elmore, the legendary broadcaster, and a guy by the name of Evan Washburn. If you watch the NFL on CBS, you know both of those guys. So he's like, "Oh, man, I got to get down here and have a few drinks with these guys." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll see if Tommy Boy wants to come down." So when he's walking in the other direction, he sees Ian Eagle. So now he's like, "All right, all these guys must be hanging out there." So he goes to the lobby waiting for the pizza. And sure enough, who does he see but none other than college basketball legend and NBA legend Chris Webber. So there's my dad, and there's the picture. There they are together, my dad and Chris Webber. So he tells the story. He goes, "Tommy boy, you got to come out. I just hung out with Chris Webber." I go, "What is going on?" I go, "I can't even move. I've worked 13 and a half hours, and I put work in air quotes. I don't want to get up. I just want to chill. It was way longer than I thought it'd be. How did you and Chris Webber start hanging out?" Well, come to find out that Chris Webber lost his room key, so he couldn't get in his room. So they're like,
"Oh, my goodness."
Chris Webber goes to the lobby. He's like, "Hey, I lost my room key. Can I get my room key?" They're like, "Well, we need to see some ID. We need to know, make sure it's you." And it's like, he's 6'11". Who do you think it was? This is Chris Webber. Of course. What are you asking for his ID?
Oh, God.
So he goes, my dad goes up to him. He's like, "Hey, Chris, great job today. You did a great job." "Oh, thanks, man." He's like, "Hey, I got to get a picture with you. All right, I got to show my son." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "Let's take a selfie." He's like, "All right, yeah, I'll take a selfie." My dad's like, "Chris, I got to be honest with you. I don't know how to take a selfie. Can you take it for me?"
CrossFit Kringle strikes again.
You can tell in this photo now, and we shared it on social as well, at Tom Goss, TOMG. It was easy. You can tell now. Look a little closer on this. Look how it's positioned. The left hand of Chris Webber it's clearly Chris Webber taking the photo. And my dad's right hand's thumbs up. So yes, he gave the phone to Chris Webber and told him, "Hey, can you take a selfie off of my phone with you and I?" And sure enough, shout out to Chris Webber, man. He actually did it. What a cool dude, man. Shout out to Chris Webber for doing that.
I'll give you this. I'll blame myself for not sending you these photos beforehand. But if I can grab them up quick on my phone. So
share them on Twitter after. Share them on Twitter after. Tag it on the host.
Yeah, yep. Check them out because I'm going to put them on there. But I have a similar story. It wasn't at an NCAA tournament though. It was at a MAC final. The MAC tournament I was covering, and it was the last year, I'm pretty sure it was the second to last year before CNN moved on from Jimmy Patsos. Jimmy Patsos was the head coach. They were in the final against Iona with Tim Cluse winning every MAC final in the last 3 or 4 years going to that point. So I'm there early before the game. It's probably 5:30 or so. And who comes ushered out on the floor? Now, if you've never been to the Times Union Center when they had the MAC tournament, they actually had like these VIP sections that were opposite the benches that people would sit in. So who comes down to, out of your favorite team, guys, the former Baltimore Oriole, Cal Ripken Jr. And I'm like, "Oh my God, there's Cal. Like, I got to go over and say hi." So I walk over and I'm talking to a couple other people that I know there and guys that are working the game. And right next to him is Sean McDonough. Now, this is before Sean McDonough was doing Monday Night Football. That's just kind of give you a little bit of a time frame now. So I talked with Sean, walking by, and I said, "Hey, Cal." I go, "Nice to meet you, man. I'm Brian. I work for the ESPN affiliate here in Albany." He's, "Oh, nice to meet you, man." I go, "Is there any way I can get a quick picture with you?" He goes, "Absolutely, sure." So a friend of mine is in the stands, so probably 15 feet away or so. And I said, hey, do you mind if I just give him the camera? I don't want to do a selfie. He goes, yeah, sure, no problem. So I hand him the phone, and he takes the picture. Now I go to bring it back, and my friend, before I gave him the phone, said, by the way, if I'm taking this picture, he's also one of the biggest Oriole fans that you'll ever meet. You better send him over because I want to take a picture too. So as he takes the picture, and you ever had times where you're taking a picture, but you're still kind of mumbling to try and talk, but you're smiling? So I'm like, yeah, Cal, hey, you see the guy taking yeah, he goes, yeah. He's like your biggest fan. So do you mind going over and taking a picture with him? So he takes the picture, looks at me, and he goes, you want to send me over there with all of those people? I'm like, I'm sorry, because I know what? I know you're a nice guy, and I know you're going to take pictures with all of them, and I'm feeding you to the wolves, so I'll blame myself for that. I'm so sorry. But knowing Cal, he was willing. He goes, you got it, no problem. He goes over, takes a picture with him. He's taking pictures with everybody. We're a half hour before tip for the MAC final, and I just pushed Cal Ripken Jr. towards all of the fans at the edge of where the stands are at the Times Union Center. I'm like, oh my goodness. I felt awful for doing it, but I was really happy to see all of what I've heard from him, what a great guy he was. And in that moment, he definitely proved it to me.
Yeah, I was going to follow up and ask if you felt guilty, but you really didn't because he was a good guy. Like you don't feel guilty about it because if you're nice enough and you kind of understand that it's just a picture and people aren't trying to take advantage of you or try to sell it. Hey, we got to see Cal Ripken in the Times Union Center. This is a really cool moment. It's a story people are going to share in the future. And we just did. So maybe Cal will be happy with that and everybody else and Chris Webber and everybody else that get to
I'll make sure I put it on Twitter after this episode because it absolutely was one of the craziest things I've ever experienced. And then, of course, for us media members, afterwards, I go to the post-game press conference. This was during the semifinal game the day before. And who's sitting there but our own friend, Freddie Coleman. And I'm sitting,
ESPN radios.
I was with one of our interns that was there doing the game too. And I go, that's Freddie Coleman. He's like, no, it's not. Now we're standing behind and he's sitting down. And I'm like, I'm telling you that's Freddie Coleman. So he goes over and he talks to his good friend was King Rice, who's still at Monmouth, talking with him. And I walked over and I said, hey, Freddie, we never met, but I've been on the air with you a few times here in Albany. I go, I'm Brian Mariano. Nice to meet you. And he goes, Brian, what's up, man? He gives me like a bro hug. And I'm like, I've never met you before in my entire life, but every time I've spoken with him or seen him in person, he has acted like we've been friends for 20 years. And I love Freddie Coleman, not only for how good he is on the air, but for the fact of he made me feel like I was his best friend. And I literally just said hi to him 5 seconds prior. It was amazing.
Love Freddie Coleman. If you haven't heard him, ESPN Radio, check him out, download all that stuff. He does a great job. Him and Ian Fitzsimmons on nights, 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. when we're taping this. So shout out to Freddie Coleman. He's got a really cool story, Capital Region Times and everything else. All right, everyone wants to get to their brackets. Everyone wants to find out. We're holding off our picks for social media. So if you want to come back in a few days and get our picks and what we're thinking about the bracket, we'll do all that stuff. I want to get you out of here on this. I felt like it's a very radio thing I just did, but I'm getting used to this in the podcast world, right? All right, so everyone's going to watch the games upcoming this week, and they're going to have that feel of, I wish I was there. I know it's different because it's all in Indiana and spread out. I wish I was. Would you do it again? Like, if you got the opportunity to cover the NCAA tournament, do you find it as an enjoyable experience? And is it look, we've both done it, but if you get offered one more opportunity to do it, would you do it?
Well, it's a good question, guys, because for me, I guess I had the two separate experiences. The first one in Buffalo, that was just kind of getting my feet wet, didn't really know what to do, was kind of running around with a chicken with my head cut off, and didn't really have a purpose to be there other than to say I finally get a chance to cover an NCAA tournament. And then when I went to Hartford the second time and had the opportunity to talk with two former players that I built a relationship with when they transferred to different schools, watching John Morant play before and Murray State winning that game, and then just having a better feel for it, I would do it again. I just don't know if I would do it in one of the smaller pods from the first weekend. If anything, I would try to get to the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 just for the sheer fact of I'm a fan too. I love that. There's nothing better than Thursday morning flipping on, having one game on the TV, one game on the iPad, another game on a separate TV. So you're just immersed. Or if you go out to, your favorite watering hole and you want to sit there and watch basketball out there, there's nothing better than just having basketball everywhere for 12 hours for 2 straight days, and you get to watch every single minute of it. So, yeah, as a fan, I don't know. I like the experience of sitting at home and being able to actually see it. I'm hopefully lucky enough, too, that with UAlbany, I want to be able to call an NCAA tournament game in the near future. That would be the hope. But I would probably say if you're a fan and you like the experience of watching all the games, it is definitely the best experience to have. But I would do it again. I would want to do it in the next level, though. Give me the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight if I could.
Yes, for me, but two things to offer to that. One, go to a city that you can have fun with for 3 days. And what I mean by that is, like, I was in Providence. So I worked on Thursday, worked on Saturday. On Friday, I had a day off because there's no games. So my dad and I went to Brown, the college there in Providence. So we're like, all right, cool. We'll go to a sports bar. We'll watch. We could not find a sports bar for the life of us in a college town. So it's just me and my dad walking through Brown. We're like, how does no one have a bar in the NCAA tournament on? We were so furious. So there we were, like, on the campus of Brown watching Michigan State lose to Middle Tennessee State off my phone. I'm like, look, this is a cool experience. I'll tell one day, but I would like to be having a few cold ones right now. Right. So if you can pick a city like, Nashville, Albany, Las Vegas, the city. Like, look, I put Albany in that mix, but what I mean is that there's bars right there at the arena. Right. So you don't have to go far if you want to watch stuff on that other day. So if you can find a really fun city to go to do that, you mentioned the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. Go to those events if it's a basketball arena.
Right.
One of the biggest things the NCAA does that I think actually hurts the product is when they put these regional finals, which is, the real term for the Elite Eight, in these football arenas. It's a hard watch, both if you're a media member and a fan, because they are not built for basketball games. You're so far away. Look, Closer and I talked about how far away we were for basketball arenas. You can barely see anything when you're there as a fan or a media member when you're in a football arena. And that goes for the Final Four. It's never going to change because there's too much money involved. But I wish the NCAA would go back to having basketball arenas host the Final Four. They want to pack it with 70,000 or 80,000 people. It's not a good watch. Go through it, not this year in particular, but years previous, and look at some of the seats where people are sitting and trying to cover the games and everything else. The Final Four is a bad setup for a basketball game. They make a ton of money, but it's not a good setup. So that's my piece of advice. Look, if you're a fan and you just want to be there and you want to root on your team, great. But look, I would go back again, but I just push that it's a basketball setting for the future. Probably it's going to fall on deaf ears with the NCAA, but that's how I feel like we can improve the product for both fans and media members.
Yeah, and there's no doubt when you get into that second weekend and then the final weekend, it is. And it is money. There's no doubt about it. It's money, because there's no reason that you would ever think that the best product is to go and sit in row double Z at Cowboy Stadium to try and watch a game on a court that's 94 feet long. And I've always said this to you, and I guess for a lot of your listeners that are Syracuse, I've always wondered that when they had games like Duke and Carolina, why not put the court in the middle of the field and try to get as many as you can? Now, I don't know if they would get that or not. You and probably other Syracuse people would get it. But then a lot of it, I think, is you lose that experience. Of where you would normally watch the games, right?
Right, season ticket holders. Hey, you buy a really good expensive seat. You want the Duke game. You want Carolina. Hey, by the way, the most important game of the year, we're going to move your season ticket. I know you usually sit courtside, or you're like, well, we're going to change your seat. Whoa, I pay too much money for that seat. Like, no. Sure. You may give them a first offer on it, but yeah, they don't want and rightfully so. Like, hey, they didn't buy that seat. That's what I feel like is always tough for the season ticket holders and stuff like that. All right, I'm going to let you go. Let's go do some bracket stuff. Enjoy the games coming up. You and I will be tweeting back and forth. Who knows? Maybe we'll get together and have some beers and wings and everything else. All right, my friend.
Yeah, we'll find a way to do that. No doubt, buddy. Thanks for having me on again, man.
I have a feeling the next time you're going to be on this podcast is a few days before a certain race that's on the first Saturday in May.
I'm well prepared, my friend. There's a lot of research on that, so nice little tease into the future of the podcast. So, yeah, I'll be well prepared for our next visit, no doubt.
Mark it on your calendars. The first Thursday in May, Closer and I will be back. All right. See you later, dude. Goodbye.
Thanks, buddy.